Good morning, everybody. It's not morning, is it? It's evening. That's why do I always oversleep? Nah, just kidding. I don't actually sleep until the evening. Unless I'm working really late at night. And welcome to another Purblind Gamer stream. Yep. Today we'll be continuing the 39 steps, which we started for stream number 50 last week, and we should finish today, as we were right about halfway, and yeah, I think we can probably finish in 3 hours. It's not a super long game, but I've been enjoying it so far, even if it is slower paced. Even considering, even compared to the book, I guess, because the book keeps up quite a fast pace. And I think it's more fun to play, like, in 2 sittings rather than trying to get through it all at once. But, yeah, the action's really starting to pick up. And let me know if the volume is better. I know. Yesterday, after I rolled back the Windows update, that fixed a bunch of problems I'd been having with older games, not opening or not capturing, but it reset a bunch of OBS settings from what or sound settings from what I could tell, so for a while I was very quiet as we played through Maldita Castilla, which was quite fun. Really good freeware Ghouls and Ghosts tribute. Hey, Artyom Havoc. Thanks for coming in. How are you doing today? Everybody, please go check out Artyom Havoc, who sometimes streams random games, trying them out, and sometimes streams Star Wars games. Quite a bit of Star Wars games, in fact. Unless I'm mistaken, there's a Star Wars holiday coming up in the near future. May 5th, I believe it is. Can't think why. Working and lurking. Yeah, I know. That's what I do plenty of times at Havoc. I'll just have a stream up while I'm trying to get work done, and then check in periodically. Or if I'm actually at an office and don't have headphones, I'll just kind of leave it up in the background and switch to it and see what the game is like, and be like, oh, I wonder what they're saying. Well, I hope stuff you're working on is going well, Havoc. And we are continuing the 39 steps, which is a really interesting adaptation. It occurred to me, I think I said last time it was more of a visual novel than a straight adventure game. I don't know if it's really a visual novel in the sense compared to most of them, because there's so few choices and it is really linear. I'd almost call it a multimedia novel, and I was thinking, it seems kind of like the Madness of Roland, which I actually have a copy of and plan to play if since I have Windows 3.1 working on DOSBox. But it's, tells a really good story, but it's really linear and limited interactivity or changes you can make. The projects are going. A lot of them to do this weekend. Oh. Well, I hope they're not overwhelming you, Havoc, and that you get to finish all of them. Yeah, after stream, there's some script coverage I should finish. That's easy. Besides, most of the scripts written aren't that great. It's like most of everything isn't that great. I feel like that's fairly universal across mediums. And even if it seems like some things are, almost universally great, that's probably because we're only remembering the good ones. Like, I like most of the radio dramas, some more than others, but there are probably plenty of really, clunky and boring ones that just were never, never saved or never released widely because they weren't that good. Yeah, I don't know if there's a separate term for things that are like visual novels or multimedia novels, but aren't, or have somewhat less interaction or are more linear. I don't know, probably not. If somebody asked me what the 39 Steps was, I would just say it's a visual novel, probably. Yeah, I'll go ahead and boot it up. And remember to choose the correct settings on startup, because the settings always reset when you close it, and if I tried to open it in 1920 by 1080 full screen, it would crash my computer, which is always frightfully awkward when you're in the middle of streaming, You're just streaming, broadcasting to the world, suddenly your computer crashes, and then you're broadcasting your startup screen, or more likely not at all. Yeah. I wonder if there is a way that this monitor could handle 1920 by 1080. If it did, everything would be so tiny, though. Like the icons and text. It's bad enough in 1280 by 800. Anyway. Enough of me rambling on. At least for a few minutes. Oh, we've already seen the intro. What's that say? Hit something to skip. Enter. Yes, it starts with the image of a pipe, because Richard Hannay does love to smoke his pipe. Okay. 8 out of 19. It's like, we really were. I was trying to hit it right about halfway when I realized it would be a bit much to stream the whole thing. Even though plenty of people do 6-hour streams without breaking a sweat. Alright. Our story thus far. Richard Hannay, well-to-do, I guess he was born in Scotland, raised in South Africa, made a bunch of money in diamond mines, went to England to live a life of leisure, but found it terribly boring, until one day, one of his neighbors in his apartment faked his own death and asked Hannay if he could hide out there, as this man, Scudder, was onto something really big. There's this huge international conspiracy and ring of espionage, with people trying to control the direction of the world. And at this point, war is inevitable, because it's set in 1914, just before World War I. But there's a faction of spies that are trying to assassinate Karolides, who's the Greek premier and one of the better world leaders. And if they do, they hope to change the course of the upcoming war and gain a great deal more control over the world after the war. And initially, Hannay didn't believe Scudder all that much. But then Scudder turned up murdered in the apartment, and Hannay found a little book of Scudder's with proof of all of this. And knowing that the spies were watching, Hannay disguised himself as the milkman and slipped out and caught a train into Scotland. He was able to escape them, but they tracked him more or less to the station where he got out. And he initially jumped out of the train, making a drunken shepherd think that he'd killed himself, and then escaped in the confusion when the drunken shepherd and his dog fell out of the train. He tried to flee across the country, but saw the enemy agents at the station when he was hoping to take another train elsewhere, and soon they started flying planes to try and look for him. The wide open countryside, he knew he wouldn't last long, so he took refuge at an inn, and convinced the innkeeper, who was terribly bored and longed for thrills, that he was part of some great international intrigue and he was pursued by bad men. And so the innkeeper, who loved adventure and wanted to be a poet but was absolutely terrible at it, helped him hide. And when the two spies pursuing him showed up, Hannay snuck out, but then realized, cars are hard to come by, it being 1914. I could just steal their car and drive off. So he did. And eventually they continued to pursue him. And he met a young lord who was a reluctant politician and absolutely terrible at it, and helped out the young lord by giving a completely BS speech about the labor movement in Australia, which he didn't really know anything about. And then I believe he enlisted Lord Harry's help and actually told him the truth. And one of the two spies who is pursuing him has a lisp, which Scudder mentioned in the book. And Scudder also mentioned that one of the mastermind, I believe, was a man who could hood his eyes like a hawk. And when I read the original 1915 novel some years ago, I was like, what the heck's that mean? Like in the Hitchcock movie, which was a very broad adaptation, they change it to the man is missing a joint on his little finger, but hood his eyes like a hawk. So you can blink, look, I hooded my eyes like a hawk. I'm a hawk. Chirp, chirp. Let's go kill some squirrels. Anyway. And since the game mostly depicts people in silhouette, and with their voices, this game really does have good voice acting. I don't know that it will clear that up for me any, but... Oh, right. And it took us a while to decode Scudder's book. That we did, and found out a great deal more information. And the second week in June is when the attempted assassination on Carolides will take place. And if Carolides goes into hiding, then he won't be able to make an appearance or push through a referendum that will ultimately help the evil spies gain their goal. So basically, he can't go into hiding, and he can't get assassinated. And we just have to stay alive till then, and not get captured. Sir Harry's pickle turns out to Hannay's advantage, as he makes friends in high places. Sir Harry really doesn't want to be a politician, he wants to go fishing. And so we begin. The radical candidate. Tuesday, 26th May 1914. Masonic Hall, Brattleburn. Ooh, I used to work in the Masonic Hall. It was where the American Shakespeare Center's offices were. And it was an internship, not working, really. I did work, but anyway, let's focus on the game. The hall had about 500 in it, women mostly. A lot of bald heads and a dozen or two young men. The chairman was a Weasley minister with a reddish nose. I thought we already got through this. Wait. Did I start at the wrong one? He lamented on Crumpleton's absence, soliloquized on his influenza, and gave me a certificate as a trusted leader of Australian thought. There were 2 policemen at the door, and I hope they took note of that testimonial. Alright, also the actual police are after me because they think I killed Scudder in what is called the Portland Place murder. And they think Scudder is actually a army captain because that was the alibi he gave and persona he played, and I told my valet that, and the valet believed it. Is it? That was the one we started on, I guess. Maybe he didn't save after we finished it, or maybe I quit before it finished. Ah, well. I'll just keep going. It's a fun part. Then Sir Harry started. He had about a bushel of notes from which he read, and when he let go of them he fell into one prolonged stutter. Every now and then he remembered a phrase he had learned by heart, straightened his back, and gave it off like Henry Irving. The next moment he was bent double and crooning over his papers. Henry Irving. I'm trying to remember who Henry Irving is. I feel like I ran across that name when I was reading lyrics of music hall songs, but I couldn't tell you. Some orator or actor. He talked about the German menace and said it was all a Tory invention to cheat the poor of their rights and keep back the great flood of social reform, but that organized labor realized this and laughed the Tories to scorn. He was all for reducing our navy as a proof of our good faith, and then sending Germany an ultimatum telling her to do the same, or we would knock her into a cocked hat. Yes, I remember wondering that's an interesting term. That's right, Germany was already arming then. He said that but for the Tories, Germany and Britain would be fellow workers in peace and reform. I thought of the little black book in my pocket. A giddy lot Scudder's friends cared for peace and reform. In a queer way, I liked the speech. You could see the niceness of the chap shining out behind the muck with which he had been spoon-fed. I mightn't be much of an orator, but I was 1,000% better than Sir Harry. I simply told them all I could remember about Australia, all about its Labour Party and emigration and universal service, praying there should be no Australian there. I doubt if I remembered to mention free trade, but I said there were no Tories in Australia, only Labours and Liberals. I'm guessing one of those is another name for the Conservative Party? And I started in to tell them the kind of glorious business I thought could be made out of the Empire if we really put our backs into it. Which is not cliched at all. Altogether, I fancy I was rather a success. The minister didn't like me, though.
I'd like to propose a vote of thanks to Sir Harry for his statesman-like speech, and to Mr. Twisden, whose words had the eloquence of an emigration agent.
We go by the pseudonym Twisden because that was the name of our neighbors in Portland Place who discovered the body.
Now, you're coming home with me. I'm all alone, and if you'll stop a day or two, I'll show you some very decent fishing.
Oh, Sir Harry. You're too kind. But God forbid you ever have a hand in running this country. Nay, this empire. Back at Sir Harry's, we had a hot supper and then drank grog. The time had come for me to put my cards on the table. I saw by this man's eyes that he was the kind you can trust.
Listen, Sir Harry. I've something pretty important to say to you. You're a good fellow, and I'm going to be frank. Where on earth did you get that poisonous rubbish you talked tonight?
Is it as bad
Such
as
a
that?
good quote.
It did sound rather
I think the
thin.
book called it appalling
I got
rot.
most of it out of the Progressive magazine and pamphlets that agent chap of mine keeps sending me. But you surely don't think Germany would ever go to war with us?
Ask that question in 6 weeks, and it won't need an answer. If you'll give me your attention for half an hour, I'm going to tell you a story.
I blinked no detail.
So you see, you have got here in your house the man that is wanted for the Portland Place murder. Your duty is to send your car for the police and give me up. I don't think I'll get very far. There'll be an accident, and I'll have a knife in my ribs an hour or so after arrest. Nevertheless, it's your duty as a law-abiding citizen. Perhaps in a month's time you'll be sorry, but you have no cause to think of that.
He was looking at me with bright, ready eyes.
What was your job in Rhodesia, Mr. Hannay?
Mining engineer. I've made my pile cleanly, and I've had a good time in the making of it.
Not a profession that weakens the nerves, is it?
As to that, my nerves are good enough.
Nerves of steel. I took the hunting knife and did the old Mashona trick of tossing it in the air and catching it in my lips. I cut myself terribly and began to bleed on the carpet. Those sound effects.
I don't want proof. I may be an ass on the platform, but I can size up a man. You're no murderer, and you're no fool. I believe you're speaking the truth. I'm going to back you up. Now, what can I do?
First, I want you to write a letter to your uncle. I've got to get in touch with the government people sometime before the 15th of June.
He pulled his
That
moustache.
won't help you. This is Foreign Office business, and my uncle would have nothing to do with it. Besides, you'd never convince him. No. I'll go one better. I'll write to the Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office. He's my godfather and one of the best going. Now, what do you want?
He sat down at his table and wrote to my dictation. Let's see. There it is. Dear Walter, I hope this letter finds you well, and I must apologize for not being in touch for such a long while. I'm finding all my time taken up with this political business, even to the detriment of my fishing. Anyway, on to more important matters. Without sounding overly enigmatic, I'm writing to say that if a man called Twisden happens to make your acquaintance before the 15th of June this year, it would be to your benefit to treat him kindly, despite what he may look like. This Twisden chap will prove his bona fides by passing the words Black Stone and whistling Annie Laurie. Listen carefully to him, dear uncle. He has something to say that might just wake you up. Cheerio and happy hunting, Harry. Black Stone. I think that was something that was mentioned in Scudder's book. And Annie Laurie is a traditional Scots song that we am particularly fond of, and heard it played on a phonograph. So that's all.
Good. That's the proper style. Oh, by the way, you'll find my godfather, his name's Sir Walter Bullivant, down at his country cottage for Whitsuntide. It's close to Artonswell on the Kennet.
Whitsuntide.
That's done. Now,
I
what's
know
the
what
next
that
thing?
is.
You're about my height. Lend me the oldest tweed suit you've got. Anything will do, so long as the colour is the opposite of the clothes I destroyed this afternoon. And then, show me a map of the neighbourhood and explain to me the lie of the land. Lastly, if the police come seeking me, just show them the car in the glen. If the other lot
Correct.
turn up,
We were in a
tell
car
them
accident.
I caught the South Express after your meeting.
He did, or promised to do, all these things. I shaved off the remnants of my mustache and got inside an ancient suit of what I believed is called heather mixture. The maps gave me some notion of my whereabouts and told me the two things I wanted to know: where the main railway to the south could be joined, and what were the wildest districts near at hand. He wakened me from my slumber in the smoking room armchair and led me blinking into the dark, starry night. An old bicycle was found in a tool shed and handed over to me.
First, turn to the right, up by the long fir wood. By daybreak, you'll be well into the hills. Then, I should pitch the machine into a bog and take to the moors on foot. You can put in a week among the shepherds and be as safe as if you were in New Guinea.
Thank you.
Think nothing of it. You got me out of a tight spot last night. Now, you better get cracking. Good luck.
The hills. I pedalled diligently up the steep roads of hill gravel till the skies grew pale with the morning. Run to the hills. Yes, this is where we were last time. But the Scottish police are pursuing him with an advantage on their home turf. Wednesday, 27th May, 1914. Peebleshire, Scotland. I sat down and took stock of my position. I realized that my vantage ground might be in reality a trap. There was no cover for a tom tit in those bald green places. Observations from a hill. My enemies had located me, and the next thing would be a cordon round me. I didn't know what force they could command, but I was certain that it would be sufficient. The aeroplane had seen my bicycle, and would conclude that I would try to escape by road. There might be a chance on the moors to the right or left. Will it let us choose? That's a bog. They might not find it for 50 years. No, a couple hundred years. Then I climbed to a knoll which gave me a view of the two valleys. At other times I would have liked the place, but now it seemed to suffocate me. The free moorlands were prison walls, and the keen hill air was the breath of a dungeon. I tossed a coin, heads right, tails left. Oops. Georgian sovereign. Then I found the roadman. Oh.
Good day to you.
This is fun. I remember this from the book. He looked at me with a fishy eye.
Found the day I ever left the herding. There I was, my own master. Now I'm a slave to the government, tethered to the roadside with sair een in a back like a suckle.
I didn't quite follow that. He was a wild figure, about my size, but much bent, with a week's beard on his chin and a big pair of horn spectacles. The plight of the road mender was a difficult one. Breaking up stones and laying them across miles of Scottish tracks was a rough job indeed.
Oh, mercy on me, my head's bursting. I can't do it. The surveyor man just report me, I'm for my bed.
What is your trouble, may I ask?
His trouble was clear enough.
The trouble is that I'm no sober. Last night my daughter Maren was wadded, and the dance still four in the byre. Me and some other chills sat down to the drinking, and here I am. Pity that I ever looked on the wine when this was red.
Sleep sounds like your best bet.
It's easy speaking. But I got a postcard yestreen saying that the new road surveyor would be round the day. He'll come and he'll no find me, or else he'll find me foo, and either way I'm a done man. I'll walk back to my bed and say I'm no wheel, but I doubt that'll no help me, for they ken my kind of no wheelness.
Then I had an inspiration.
Where's your house?
I was directed by a wavering finger to the cottage by the stream.
Well, back to your bed and sleep in peace. I'll take on your job for a bit and see the surveyor.
He stared at me blankly. Then, as a notion dawned on his fuddled brain, his face broke into the vacant drunkard's smile.
Hey, you're the Billy. It'll be easy enough managed. I've finished that bing of stains, so you needn't chop any more for noon. Just take the barry and wheel enough metal for your own quarry down the road to make another bing the morn. My name's Alexander Turnbull, and I've been 7 years at the trade and 20 afore that herding in Leith and Water. My friends call me Eki, and Wales Specky, for I wear glasses in wake of the sight. Just you speak the surveyor fair and calm, sir, and you'll be well pleased.
It's like the
I'll be
ZX
back,
Specky.
midday.
I borrowed his spectacles and filthy old hat, stripped off coat, waistcoat and collar, and gave him them to carry home. I borrowed, too, the foul stump of a clay pipe as an extra property. Property as in prop. He indicated my simple tasks, and without more ado, set off at an amble homewards, or bedwards. Then I set to work to dress for the part. I opened the collar of my shirt. It was a vulgar blue and white check, such as ploughmen wear, and revealed a neck as brown as any tinker's. I rubbed a good deal of dirt also into the sunburn of my cheeks. My boots did not satisfy me, but by dint of kicking among the stones I reduced them to the granite-like surface which marks a roadman's footgear. I broke one of the bootlaces and retied it in a clumsy knot, and loosed the other so that my slick, thick grey socks bulged over the uppers. I bit and scraped my fingernails till the edges were all cracked and uneven. The men I was matched against would miss no detail. I rolled up my sleeves, and there was a forearm which might have been a blacksmith's, sunburned and rough with old scars. A roadman's eyes would no doubt be a little inflamed, so I contrived to get some dust in both of mine, and by dint of vigorous rubbing produced a bleary effect. There's a lot of details, well. The sandwiches Sir Harry had given me had gone off with my coat, but the roadman's lunch, tied up with a red handkerchief, was at my disposal. I did up the bundle again and put the paper conspicuously beside it. Soon I grew warm, and the dust on my face changed into a solid and abiding grit. On I went, trundling my loads of stone with the heavy step of the professional. I read those in the wrong order, sorry.
Are you Alexander Turnbull? I am the new County Road Surveyor. You live at Black Hopefoot and have charge of the section from Laidlaw Byres to the Rigs. Good. A fair bit of road, Turnbull, and not badly engineered. A little soft about a mile off and the edges want cleaning. See you look after that. Good morning. You'll know me the next time you see me.
Clearly my get-up was good enough for the dreaded surveyor. Oh. But will it be good enough for our pursuers? Roadside deception. Wednesday, 27th May, Peebleshire, Scotland. Just about midday, a big car stole down the hill, glided past, and drew up 100 yards beyond. Its 3 occupants descended as if to stretch their legs and sauntered towards me. Two of the men I had seen before from the window of the Galloway Inn, one lean, sharp, and dark, the other comfortable and smiling. The third had the look of a countryman, a vet perhaps, or a small farmer. He was dressed in ill-cut knickerbockers, and the eye in his head was as bright and wary as a hen's.
Morning! That's a fine, easy job of yours.
Knickerbockers. I slowed and painfully straightened my back after the roadman, spat vigorously after the manner of a low Scot, and regarded them steadily before replying.
There's world jobs, and there's better. I would rather have yours, sitting all day on your hinterlands in 8 cushions. It's you and your muckle cars that wreck my roads. If we all had our richts, you should be made to mend what you break.
The bright-eyed man was looking at the newspaper lying beside Turnbull's bundle.
I see you get your papers in good time.
Aye, in good time. Seeing that paper come out last Saturday, I'm just 6 days late.
He picked it up, glanced at the superscription, and laid it down again.
You've a fine taste in boots. These were never made by a country shoemaker.
They were not. They were made in London. I got they through the gentleman that was here last year for the shooting. What was his name now?
Oops.
Let's get on. This fellow is all right. Did you see anyone
he's
pass
German.
early this morning? He might be on a bicycle or he might be on foot.
They nearly fell into the trap. I very nearly fell into the trap, and told a story of a bicyclist hurrying past in the grey dawn.
Wasn't up very early. You see, my daughter was married last night. We keeping it up late. I opened the house door about 7, and there was nobody on the road then. Since I come up here, there has just been the baker and the Rachill herd, besides you gentlemen.
One of them gave me a cigar, which I smelt gingerly and stuck in Turnbull's bundle. They were out of sight in 3 minutes, and my heart leaped with an enormous relief. I went on, wheeling my stones. It was as well, for 10 minutes later, the car returned, one of the occupants waving a hand to me. Those gentry left nothing to chance. I finished Turnbull's bread and cheese, and pretty soon I had finished the stones. The next step was what puzzled me. I had a notion that the cordon was still tight around the glen, and that if I walked in any direction, I should meet with questioners. Get out I must. No man's nerve could stand more than a day of being spied on. Then suddenly...
Excuse me, may I trouble you for a light?
By an amazing chance, I knew him. His name was Marmaduke Jopley, and he was an offense to creation. Tell us what you really think, Mr. Hannay. An offense to creation. What an insult. He was a sort of blood stockbroker who did his business by toadying eldest sons and rich young peers and foolish old ladies. He would crawl a mile on his belly to anything that had a title or a million. I had a business introduction to his firm when I came to London, and he was good enough to ask me to dinner at his club. There he showed off at a great rate, and pattered about his duchesses till the snobbery of the creature turned me sick. I asked a man afterwards why nobody kicked him, and was told that Englishmen reverence the weaker sex. There's some good writing. Anyhow, there he was now, nattily dressed in a fine new car, obviously on his way to visit some of his smart friends, and he hadn't a clue who I was.
Hello, Jopley. Well met, my lad.
Who the devil are you?
My name's Hannay, from Rhodesia, you remember?
Good God, the murderer!
Just so. And there'll be a second murder, my dear, if you don't do as I tell you. Give me that coat of yours, that cap too.
He did as bid, for he was blind with terror. Over my dirty trousers and vulgar shirt I put on his smart driving coat, which buttoned high at the top, and thereby had the deficiencies of my collar. I stuck the cap on my head, and added his gloves to my get-up. The dusty roadman in a minute was transformed into one of the neatest motorists in Scotland. On Mr. Jopley's head I clapped Turnbull's unspeakable hat and told him to keep it there.
Now, my child, sit quite still and be a good boy. I mean you no harm. I'm only borrowing your car for an hour or two. But if you play me any tricks, and above all, if you open your mouth, as sure as there's a God above me, I'll wring your neck. Savvy?
Just don't hurt me.
What a weasel. I enjoyed that evening ride. As the dark fell, I turned up a side glen into an unfrequented corner of the hills. Soon the villages were left behind, and then the farms, and then even the wayside cottage. Here we stopped, and I obligingly reversed the car and restored to Mr. Jopley his belongings.
1,000 thanks. There's more use in you than I thought. Now be off and find the police.
I'll get you!
Of course you will, Jopley. Of course you will. In your dreams. As I sat on the hillside, I reflected on the various kinds of crime I had now sampled. Contrary to general belief, I was not a murderer, but I had become an unholy liar, a shameless impostor, and a highwayman with a marked taste for expensive motor cars. The game is up. Oh, I don't know, looks like there's a bit more of the game to play through. Yeah. The game is up. Thursday, 28th May, Peebleshire, Scotland. I spent the night on the hillside. It was a cold business, for I had neither coat nor waistcoat. These were in Mr. Turnbull's keeping, as was Scudder's little book, my watch, and, worst of all, my pipe and tobacco pouch. Only my money accompanied me. Oops. Oh, right. I forgot. Accidentally right-click and it will force you to return to the start of a chapter. Do not right-click in this game. You will regret it. Pipe and tobacco. Only my money accompanied me in my belt, and about half a pound of ginger biscuits in my trousers pocket. I stuffed on half those biscuits, and by worming myself deep into the heather got some kind of warmth. So far, I had been miraculously lucky. My chief trouble was that I was desperately hungry. I lay and tortured myself, for the ginger biscuits merely emphasized the aching void, with the memory of all the good food I had thought so little of in London. Reminds me of something from my great-grandfather's diary. I'll explain later. In longing hopelessly for those dainties, I fell asleep. I woke very cold and stiff, about an hour after dawn. It took me a little while to remember where I was. I raised myself on my arms, and looked down into the valley, and that one look set me lacing up my boots in mad haste. There were men below, not more than a quarter-mile off, spaced out on the hillside like a fan, and beating the heather. Marmee had not been slow in looking for his revenge. I scrambled up to the top of the ridge. My pursuers were patiently quartering the hillside and moving upwards. Keeping behind the skyline, I ran for maybe half a mile. Then I showed myself. The line of search had changed its direction. I pretended to retreat over the skyline, but instead went back the way I had come. In 20 minutes, I was behind the ridge, overlooking my sleeping place, The police had evidently called in local talent to their aid, and the men I could see had the appearance of herds or gamekeepers. The exercise had warmed my blood, and I was beginning to enjoy myself. I trusted to the strength of my legs, but I was well aware that those behind me would be familiar with the lie of the land, and that my ignorance would be a heavy handicap. My stratagem had given me a fair start, call it 20 minutes, and I had the width of a glen behind me before I saw the first heads of the pursuers. From that viewpoint, I had the satisfaction of seeing the pursuit streaming up the hill at the top of the glen on a hopelessly false start. It began to seem less of a game. Those fellows behind me were hefty men on their native heath. Looking back, I saw that only 3 were following direct, and I guessed that the others had fetched a circuit to cut me off. I resolved to get out of this tangle of glens to the pocket of moor I had seen from the tops. I put on a great spurt and got off my ridge and down into the moor before any figures appeared on the skyline behind me. Clearly the road ran to a house, and I began to think of doing the same. Run. Approach. I saw the face of an elderly gentleman meekly watching me from within the glass veranda. Seated at the knee-hole desk was the benevolent old gentleman with some papers and open volumes before him. His face was round and shiny, with big glasses stuck on the end of his nose, and the top of his head was as bright and bare as a glass bottle.
You seem in a hurry, my friend.
I nodded towards the window. It gave a prospect across the moor and revealed figures half a mile off struggling through the heather.
Ah, I see. A fugitive from justice, eh? Well, we'll go into the matter at our leisure. Meantime, I object to my privacy being broken in upon by the clumsy rural policeman. Go into my study and you will see 2 doors facing you. Take the one on the left and close it behind you. You will be perfectly safe.
A stroke of luck, eh? Once again, I had found an unexpected sanctuary. The master of the house, sitting in a deep armchair, now regarded me with curious eyes. A sparsely furnished place.
They have gone. I convinced them that you'd crossed the hill. I do not choose that the police should come between me and one whom I am delighted to honor. This is a lucky morning for you, Mr. Richard Hammy.
Oh, shit. As he spoke, his eyelids seemed to tremble and to fall a little over his keen grey eyes. Oh, That's the eyes that we saw on the title screen. In a flash, the phrase of Scudder's came back to me when he had described the man who he most dreaded in the world. He said that he could hood his eyes like a hawk. I saw that I had walked straight into the enemy headquarters. Blackstone boss. Oh, wait, was Blackstone the group? Throttle. He seemed to anticipate my intention, for he smiled gently and nodded to the door behind me. I turned and saw two men servants who had me covered with pistols. He knew my name, but he had never seen me before. And as the reflection darted across my mind, I saw a slender chance.
I don't know what you mean. And who are you calling Richard Anning? My name's Ainsley.
So, but of course you have others. We won't quarrel about a name.
I was pulling myself together now, and I reflected that my garb, lacking coat and waistcoat and collar, would at any rate not betray me. I put on my surliest face and shrugged my shoulders.
Suppose you're going to give me up after all, and I call it a damn dirty trick. Oh, God. I wish I'd never seen that cursed motor car. Here's the money and be damned to you.
He opened his eyes at that. A little.
Oh no, I shall not give you up. My friends and I will have a little private settlement with you. That is all. You know a little too much, Mr. Hannay. You're a clever actor, but not quite clever enough.
He spoke with as assurance that I could see the dawning of a doubt in his mind.
For God's sake, stop jawing. Everything is against me. I haven't had a bit of luck since I came on shore at Leith. What's the harm in a poor devil with an empty stomach picking up some money he finds in a bust-up motor car? That's all I've done, and for that, I've been chivied for 2 days by those blasted bobbies over those blasted hills. I tell you, I'm fair sick of it. You know what you like, old boy? Ned Ainsley's got no fight left in him.
I could see that the doubt was gaining.
Will you oblige me with the story of your recent doings?
I can't, Governor. I've not had a bite to eat for 2 days. Give me a mouthful of food, and then you'll hear God's truth.
He gave us a pasty, it looks like. That much was true. We were fairly starving. I wolfed them down like a pig, or rather, like Ned Ainsley, for I was keeping up my character. Then I told him my story. Oh boy, another silent movie. I love these. God's truth. Ned Ainsley was a common Londoner who had arrived at Leith a week ago and was making his way overland to his brother at Wigtown. He found 3 sovereigns lying on the seat of a bust-up car and another on the floor. There was nobody there, or any sign of an owner, so Ainsley pocketed the cash. He tried to change a sovereign at the baker's, but the woman cried for the police. Police! A little later, the police had tracked him down and Ainsley was on the run across Scotland. Sans his coat.
I can have the money back for a fat lot of good it's done me. Those perishers are all down on a poor man. Now, if it had been you, Governor, that had found the quids, nobody would have troubled you.
You're a good liar, Hanny.
Stop fooling, damn you. I tell you, my name's Ainsley, and I've never heard of anyone called Annie in my born days. I'd sooner have the police than you with your Hannays and your monkey-faced pistol tricks. No, Governor, I beg pardon. I don't mean that. I'm much obliged to you for the grub, and I'll thank you to let me go now the coast's clear.
It was obvious he was badly puzzled. He had never seen me, and my appearance must have altered considerably from my photographs.
I do not propose to let you go. If you are what you say you are, you will soon have a chance of clearing yourself. If you are what I believe you are, I do not think you will see the light much longer.
He rang a bell and a third servant appeared from the veranda. That's right, they don't want to interrogate me here and tell me too much. Also, they know I have Scudder's book, and if they search me, they won't find it on me.
I want the Lanchester in 5 minutes. There will be 3 to luncheon.
You'll know me next time, Governor.
Karl, stecke diesen in den Lagerraum. Und bis ich zurückkomme, bist du mir vor ihm verantwortlich.
I don't speak German, but I think they said stash him in that other room. I was marched out of the room with a pistol at each ear. Desperate measures. Ooh. Yeah, things are getting pretty tense here. Could go either way. But so I know a sovereign, which I don't think I figured out until I looked it up in high school or something, is £1 in coin form. And my understanding is they were, made in fairly large quantities, but not necessarily used that commonly in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. Maybe used more commonly than guineas, because a guinea was 21 shillings and a sovereign or pound was 20 shillings. And then I think they stopped making them, like maybe during the Depression. And then, at least after they went to the decimal system in the 70s, they started, or at some point after that, they started making sovereigns again. And now they're like the most common. I mean, I don't think they even make £1 notes in England anymore. Actually, do I have a sovereign? I know I have one here. Where I would have put it. I need to organize my change better. I need to That's a sovereign. It's one of the decimal system sovereigns that they made. I don't know, because they would change the design every 5 years between the early 80s and a couple of years ago they stopped minting the round ones and started making dodecagonal sovereigns that looked like the old threepence pieces. They're harder to counterfeit. Yes, I still have a few left over. When I studied abroad one summer in England quite a while ago. Oh yes, that's all the education for this stream. Now let's continue with desperate measures. In the jaws of the enemy, Hannay's fate appears sealed. The clock is ticking against Hannay and Great Britain. Fortunately, Richard Hannay is not the sort of man to give up, and neither is Ned Ainsley. 29th May, Blackstone HQ, Scotland. The whole place smelt of mould and disuse. The old boy had gone off in a motor to collect the 2 ruffians who had interviewed me yesterday. So I guess whatever that word he said was a type of car. I can't remember what it was. Now, they had seen me as the roadman, and they would remember me, for I was in the same rig. What was a roadman doing 20 miles from the beat, pursued by the police? A question or two would put them on the track. Probably they had seen Mr. Turnbull. Probably Marmee too. Most likely they could link me up with Sir Harry, and then the whole thing would be crystal clear. The more I thought of it, the angrier I grew, and I had to get up and move about the room. Enemy storeroom. Aha. I couldn't open the boxes. That's the only thing to find here. And we got the door open. And it's just a cupboard. We pick something up, but it won't tell us what. Well, all in good time. We've got everything here. Let's rush through these action sequences when I could be looking at each picture. So we're rigging something up. I'm sure it'll explain. It was lentonite, a powerful explosive I knew from my time as a mining engineer. I've never heard of lentonite before. But I had forgotten the proper charge and the right way of preparing it, and I wasn't sure about the timing. I had only a vague notion, too, as to its power, for though I had used it, I had not handled it with my own fingers. But it was a chance, the only possible chance. The remembrance of little Scudder decided me. nice explosive. It was about the beastliest moment of my life, for I'm no good at these cold-blooded resolutions. Still I managed to rake up the pluck to set my teeth and choke back the horrid doubts that flooded in on me. I simply shut off my mind and pretended I was doing an experiment as simple as Guy Fawkes fireworks. Quite an explosion. The demolition man. My stupor can scarcely have lasted beyond a few seconds. I stepped over the broken lintel and found myself standing in a yard in a dense and acrid fog. I felt very sick and ill, but I could move my limbs, and I staggered blindly forward away from the house. A small mill lade ran in a wooden aqueduct at the other side of the yard. I fell into this. The cool water revived me, and I had just enough wits left to think of escape. I squirmed up the lade among the slippery green slime till I reached the mill wheel. Then I wiggled through the axle hole into the old mill and tumbled onto a bed of chaff. A nail caught the seat of my trousers, and I left a wisp of heather mixture behind me. Nausea shook me, and a wheel in my head kept turning, while my left shoulder and arm seemed to be stricken with a palsy. I crawled down the broken ladder, scattering chaff behind me to cover my footsteps. I did the same on the mill floor and on the threshold where the door hung on broken hinges. I slipped across the space, got to the back of the dovecot, and prospected a way of ascent. By use of outjutting stones, gaps in the masonry, and a tough ivy root, I got to the top. I found space to lie down. Oh, they don't send the plane over again. Downward spiral. Eyes of a hawk. I wonder. 30th May, 1914. Blackstone HQ, Scotland. I awoke with a burning head and the sun glaring in my face. For a long time I lay motionless, for those horrible fumes seemed to have loosened my joints and dulled my brain. There was a little gap in the parapet to which I wriggled, and from which I had some sort of prospect of the yard. I saw figures come out, a servant with his head bound up, and then a younger man in knickerbockers. I saw the rotund figure of my late captor, and I thought I made out the man with a lisp. I noticed that all had pistols. They were looking for something, and moved towards the mill. For half an hour they ransacked the mill. Then they came outside and stood just below the dovecot, arguing fiercely. I heard them fiddling with the door of the dovecot, and for one horrid moment I fancied they were coming up. Then they thought better of it and went back to the house. Probably figured there was no way I could get through and be up there. All that long, blistering afternoon I lay baking on the rooftop. Thirst was my chief torment. My tongue was like a stick. It kind of reminds me of a scene from Kidnapped, where they're on the top of some almost inscalable tor or something in the sun, terribly thirsty, and the soldiers are searching for them. I watched the course of the little stream as it came from the moor. I would have given £1,000 to plunge my face into that. I saw the car speed away with 2 occupants, and a man on a hill pony riding east. I wished them joy of their quest. If that aeroplane came back, the chances were 10 to 1 that I would be discovered. So through the afternoon I lay and prayed for the coming of darkness. On the dovecot. My shoulder was in a bad way. At first I thought it was only a bruise, but it seemed to be swelling, and I had no use of my left arm. I had a crushing headache, and felt as sick as a cat. Those lentonite fumes had fairly poisoned me, and the baking hours on the dovecot hadn't helped matters. It seemed to me that the sooner I got in touch with the Foreign Office man, Sir Walter Bullivant, the better. He must just take or leave my story, and anyway, with him I would be in better hands than those devilish Germans. I had begun to feel quite kindly toward the British police. My plan was to seek Mr. Turnbull's cottage, recover my garments, and especially Scudder's notebook, then make for the main line and get back to the south. I had neither coat, waistcoat, collar, nor hat. My trousers were badly torn, and my face and hands were black with the explosion. I dare say I had other beauties, for my eyes felt as if they were furiously bloodshot. Thank God it was a black night. My thirst was too great to allow me to tarry, so about 9 o'clock, so far as I could judge, I started to descend. Halfway down I heard the back door of the house open, and saw the gleam of a lantern against the mill wall. For some agonizing minutes I hung by the ivy and prayed that whoever it was would not come around by the dovecot. Then the light disappeared, and I dropped as softly as I could onto the hard soil of the yard. I crawled on my belly in the lee of a stone dyke till I reached the fringe of trees which surrounded the house. I was in a pretty bad way. That airplane is in real life, it's not in the game. 10 minutes later, my face was in the spring, and I was soaking down pints of the blessed water. But I did not stop till I had put 6 miles between me and that accursed dwelling. Really are beautiful landscapes in this game. I sat down and took stock of my position. Sir Harry's map had given me the lie of the land. All I had to do was to steer a point or two west of southwest to come to the stream where I had met the roadman. I calculated I must be about 18 miles distant, and that meant I could not get there before morning. Very soon after daybreak, I made an attempt to clean myself in a hill burn, and then approached a herd's cottage, for I was feeling the need of food. A burn's a small stream, I believe.
What in the name of... What's happened to you?
Forgive me. I've taken a pretty bad fall.
Come in. Come in.
First impressions. The herd's wife. She was a decent old body, and a plucky one, for though she got a fright when she saw me, she had an axe handy, and would have used it on any evildoer. I don't know what she took me for. A repentant burglar, perhaps. Like a true Samaritan, she asked no questions, but gave me a bowl of milk with a dash of whiskey in it, and let me sit for a little by the kitchen fire. She would have bathed my shoulder, but it ached so badly that I would not let her touch it. She showed me how to wrap the plaid around my shoulders, and when I left the cottage I was the living image of the kind of Scotsman you see in the illustration to Burns's poems.
Please, take this as payment for your hospitality.
No. Keep your siller. No. Give it to them that hae richt it. Oh, richt then if you insist. Take my plaid and, this old hat that belonged to my man.
Once again, we've got a new disguise. We're setting out across the country. I passed over the miseries of that night among the wet hills. Twice I lost my way, and I had some nasty falls into peat bogs. Oops. I can make it come back. I had only about 10 miles to go as the crow flies, but my mistakes made it nearer 20. The last bit was completed with set teeth and a very light and dizzy head. But I managed it, and in the early dawn I was knocking at Mr. Turnbull's door. Hopefully neither the police or the spies have been here.
Where are ye that comes stravaiging here in the Sabbath morning?
My head was swimming so wildly that I could not frame a coherent answer, but he recognized me.
Ah. Aye, have you got my specs?
I fetched them out of my trouser pocket.
You'll have come for your jacket and waistcoat. Come on by. Losh, man, you're terrible down to the legs. Hold up till I get you to a chair.
Yeah. Say that's an understatement, Mr. Turnbull. I had a good deal of fever in my bones, and the wet night had brought it out, while my shoulder and the effects of the fumes combined to make me feel pretty bad. I perceived that I was in for a bout of malaria. I guess I caught it during my days in Africa. I know as I've read in literature, it'll sometimes resurface periodically through the years. Before I knew, Mr. Turnbull was helping me off with my clothes and putting me to bed in one of the 2 cupboards that lined the kitchen walls. He was a true friend in need, that old roadman. Dry fly fisherman. Thursday, 11th June, 1914. Turnbull's Cottage, Scotland. When my skin was cool again, I found that the bout had more or less cured my shoulder. Very helpful of that malaria. But it was a baddish go, and though I was out of bed in 5 days, it took me some time to get my legs again. Turnbull went out each morning, leaving me milk for the day and locking the door behind him, and came in the evening to sit silent in the chimney corner. Not a soul came near the place, and he never bothered me with a question. He never even sought my name. Just a second, I think I heard my phone go off. I can't think it's anything of great import. Nah. Oh, another newspaper. What? Is it highlighting? Is this the important part? No. Sale of exhibition purchases. It seemed like the other times, like part of it was highlighted, but I'm not seeing that here. Oh, maybe it's on the other page. Ah, yeah, here we are. From private correspondence. London, Thursday night. The recent outrages perpetrated by the suffragettes have aroused such indignation throughout the country that it is expected an early opportunity will be taken after the reassembling of Parliament to raise the whole question of the treatment of the women found guilty of such criminal acts. They were destroying a portrait, I believe, we read about last time. Whittles. Interesting. I'm almost tempted to read the whole newspaper, which I'm sure is quite interesting, but I know that would take a long time indeed. Anyhow. Oh, it was the last part. The feeling. King and school children. Letter in reply to birthday congratulations. The type's even smaller. Hold on. The Press Association is requested to give publicity to the following correspondence in reference to the birthday congratulations sent by thousands of school children to the King on Wednesday. Buckingham Palace, June 4th. Sir, as it is impossible to deal individually with the thousands of birthday letters which the King has received from children living in all parts of the country, I am commanded to ask you to be good enough to publish in your next issue the accompanying letter from His Majesty. Yours very faithfully, signed, Stanfordman. The following is the King's letter referred to by His Majesty's private secretary, Buckingham Palace. I have received many thousands of letters from children who have sent me their good wishes for my birthday. Their greetings have given me great pleasure, and I thank them from my heart. I trust that as their own birthdays come round, they may be blessed with as much happiness as they wished for me today. Signed, George R1. George R.I.? The Press Association adds that that's the only important part, or the most important part. Let's see. No further trace of aviator. A report circulated yesterday that Mr. Gustav Hamel, the missing airman, has been rescued at sea and landed in South. A report circulated yesterday that Mr. Gustav Hamel, the missing airman, has been rescued at sea and landed in South Shields is unfortunately not correct. Our South Shields correspondent, after extensive inquiries made, says that the report of Hamel's safety originated in a very simple way. A vessel was seen 4 miles south of the Tyno with a flag flying on the masthead, and the spectators on the coast were attracted by what they supposed to be a signal. The Coast Guards endeavored to get in touch with the vessel, but she was apparently too far off. There was an impression that she was endeavoring to send word that she had rescued the missing aviator, and the report quickly spread and reached South Shields, where it soon became common property that Hamel had been rescued and was on his way to South Shields. It was just we read part of that story about the missing aviator. I believe was going to attempt the first transatlantic flight last time we were playing. I assume that's something that was really happening at the time. 1950, was it? Maybe it wasn't transatlantic, I don't know. Oh, right, show text. I forgot, because even when I zoomed in so much, text was a little hard to read. I turned off text smoothing in zoom text because I think that's what was playing hell with GPU usage. Oh, yeah. Wish I'd remembered about this earlier. Yeah. And that's all they're going to give us, but it's good to know that that's all that's important. This comes. Oh. All that's important was the date of the paper. Let's see what else we have. To find here. Is that? No. Aha. One day he produced my
Here's your
belt from a
belt.
lockfast
There's a terrible
drawer.
heap of siller in it. You better count it to see it's there.
Thank you, but I'm sure there's no need. By the way, could you tell me, has anyone been inquiring after me?
Aye, there was a man in a motor car. He speared what I'd taken my place that day, and I let on I thought him daft. But he keep it on at me, and saying I said he might be thinking of my good brother for the clich that whiles lean me a horn. He was a Welsh looking soul, and I couldn't understand the half of his English tongue.
Is he Welsh looking? I was getting restless those last days, and as soon as I felt myself fit, I decided to be off. As luck would have it, a drover went past that morning taking some cattle to Moffat. He was a man named Hislop, a friend of Turnbull's, and he came in to his breakfast with us and offered to take me with him. I made Turnbull accept £5 for my lodging, and a hard job I had of it. There was never a more independent being. When I told Turnbull how much I owed him, he grunted something about one good turn deserving another. He would have thought from our leave-taking that we had parted in disgust. Interesting character. Driving cattle is a mortally slow job, and we took the better part of the day to cover a dozen miles. Imagine having to walk like 12 miles and thinking that was slow. I'm glad I don't have to do that. The drover. Hislop was a cheery soul who chattered all the way over the pass and down the sunny vale of Annan. I talked of Galloway markets and sheep prices, and Hislop made up his mind I was a pack shepherd from those parts, whatever that may be. I had no mind for the summer and little for Hislop's conversation, for as the fateful 15th of June drew near, I was overweighed by the hopeless difficulties of my enterprise. If I had not had such an anxious heart, I would have enjoyed that time. At Moffat, I got some dinner in a humble public house, then walked 2 miles to the junction on the main line. The night express for the south was not due till near midnight, however. So to fill up the time, I went up on the hillside and fell asleep, for the walk had tired me. I all but slept too long, and had to run to the station and catch the train with 2 minutes to spare. About 6 o'clock in the evening, a weary and travel-stained being was, with a checked black and white plaid over his arm, descended on the little station of Artenswell. There were several people on the platform, and I thought I had better wait to ask my way till I was clear of the place. Oh, there. I came to a bridge and fell to whistling. Is that any Laurie? A fisherman had come up from the waterside. He leaned his delicate 10-foot split cane rod against the bridge and looked with me at the water.
Clear, isn't it? I'd back our Kennet any day against the test. Look at that big fella. 4 pounds if it's an ounce. But the evening rise is over and you can't tempt him.
I don't see him.
Look, there. A yard from the reeds, just above that stickle.
Ah, I've got him now. You might swear he was a black stone.
So. Twisden's the name, isn't it?
No.
Ah.
I mean to say, yes.
I'd forgotten all about my alias.
It's a wise conspirator that knows his own name.
So that is... It is Sir Walter. Who Harry sent the letter to. I stood up and looked at him. The square cleft jaw, and the broad, lined brow, and the firm folds of cheek, and began to think that here at last was an ally worth having. Our allies so far have been somewhat of a mixed bag. Suddenly he frowned.
I call it disgraceful. Disgraceful that an able-bodied man like you should dare to beg. You can get a meal from my kitchen, but you'll get no money from me.
Evening, Sir Walter.
That's my house. Wait 5 minutes and then go round to the back door.
And with that he left me. Am I forgetting something about how we knew to meet him there, at the bridge? At the back door, a grave butler was awaiting me. Oh, there's a letter Sir Harry sent talked about fishing. Yeah, I just missed something. I'm forgetting. He led me along a passage and up a back staircase to a pleasant bedroom looking towards the river.
How Mr. Reggie's things would fit you, sir. He keeps some clothes here, for he comes regular on the weekends. There's a bathroom next door, and I'll prepare hot bath. Dinner in half an hour, sir. You'll hear the gong.
The grave being withdrew, and I sat down in a chintz-covered easy-chair and gaped. It was like a pantomime to come suddenly out of beggardom into this orderly comfort. Obviously, Sir Walter believed in me, though why he did I could not guess. Sometimes I accidentally advance and have to rewind. I resolved not to puzzle my head, but take the gifts the gods had provided. I shaved and bathed luxuriously, and got into dress clothes and clean crackling, and I got into the dress clothes and clean crackling shirt which fitted me not so badly. By the time I had finished, the looking glass showed a not unpersonable young man. Grave news. We only have a couple days left, though, to save Carolides. 13th June 1914. Sir Walter's Cottage, Arton Swell. Sir Walter awaited me in the dining room. The sight of him, so respectable and established and secure, the embodiment of law and government and all the conventions, took me aback and made me feel an interloper. He couldn't know the truth about me, or he wouldn't treat me like this. I simply could not accept his hospitality on false pretenses.
I'm more obliged to you than I can say, but I'm bound to make things clear. I'm an innocent man, but I'm wanted by the police. I've got to tell you this, and I won't be surprised if you kick me out.
That's all right. Don't let that interfere with your appetite. We can talk about these things after dinner.
I like this fellow's spirit. It made me almost hysterical to be sitting there, waited on by a footman and a sleek butler, and remember that I had been living for 3 weeks like a brigand, with every man's hand against me. Then we went to his study for coffee. I made up my mind that if I ever got rid of this business and had a house of my own, I would create just such a room. Then when the coffee cups were cleared away, and we had got our cigars alight, he bade me get started with my yarn.
I've obeyed Harry's instructions, and the bribe he offered me was that you would tell me something to wake me up. I'm ready, Mr. Harry.
I noticed with a start that he had called me by my proper name. Ooh, a ripping yarn. I told of my boredom in London, and the night I had come back to find Scudder gibbering on my doorstep. I told him all Scudder had told me about Carolides and the Foreign Office Conference, and that made him purse his lips and grin. Then I got to the murder, and he grew solemn again. He heard all about the milkman and my time in Galloway, the innkeeper, and my deciphering Scudder's notes at the inn. He drew a breath when I whipped the little black book from my pocket. I described my meeting with Sir Harry and the speeches at the hall, at which he laughed uproariously. My day as the roadman excited him a bit. He made me describe the two fellows in the car very closely, and seemed to be raking back in his memory. He grew merry again when he heard of the fate of that ass Jopley. The old man in the moorland house solemnized him. Again I had to describe every detail of his appearance.
You may dismiss the police from your mind. You're in no danger from the law of this land.
Great Scott. Have they got the murderer?
No. But for the last fortnight, they've dropped you from the list of possibles.
Oh, that's good.
Why?
Principally because I received a letter from Scudder. I knew something of the man, and he did several jobs for me. He was half crank, half genius, but he was wholly honest. Trouble about him was his partiality for playing a lone hand. That made him pretty well useless in any secret service. A pity, for he had uncommon gifts. I think he was the bravest man in the world, for he was always shivering with fright, and yet nothing would choke him off. I had a letter from him on the 31st of May.
He had been dead a week by then.
The letter was written and posted on the 23rd. He evidently did not anticipate an immediate decease. His communications usually took a week to reach me, for they were sent undercover to Spain and then to Newcastle. He had a mania, you know, for concealing his tracks.
And who can blame him after what happened? He got up and crossed the room to a cabinet, bringing back Scudder's letter. Sir Walter, I am in the gravest danger. My worst fears have been realized. My enemies are here in London. They have made themselves known. I cannot write more, in case these words are intercepted, but I have found shelter with a good friend who lives near Portland Place. God willing, you will hear from me before the 15th June. Your servant, Franklin P. Scudder.
I think his object was to clear you if anything happened. But when I got it, I went to Scotland Yard, went over the details of the inquest, and concluded that you were the friend. We made inquiries about you, Mr. Hannay, and found you were respectable. I thought I knew the motives for your disappearance. Not only the police, the other one, too. And when I got Harry's scrawl, I guessed at the rest. I've been expecting you any time this past week.
Thank heavens.
You can imagine what a load this took off my mind. I felt a free man once more.
Let us have the little notebook.
It took us a good hour to work through it. His face was very grave before he had finished, and he sat silent for a while.
I don't know what to make of it. He's right about one thing. What is going to happen the day after tomorrow? How the devil can it have got known? That is ugly enough in itself. All this about war and the Black Stone, it reads like some wild melodrama. If only I had more confidence in Scudder's judgment. Trouble about him was that he was too romantic. He had the artistic temperament and wanted a story to be better than God meant it to be. He had a lot of odd biases.
That's a good way to put it.
Jews, for example, made him see red. Jews and the high finance.
Oh dear.
Black Stone. Der Schwarze Stein. Yeah, it's like a penny novelette. And all this stuff about Carolides. That is the weak part of the tale, for I happen to know that the virtuous Carolides is likely to outlast us both. There's no state in Europe that wants him gone. Besides, he's just been playing up to Berlin and Vienna and giving my chief some uneasy moments.
Well, it's not necessarily a state that's behind this.
No. Scudder's gone off the track there. Frankly, Hannay, I don't believe that part of his story. There's some nasty business afoot, and he found out too much and lost his life over it. But I'm ready to take my oath that it's ordinary spy work. A certain great European power makes a hobby of her spy system, and her methods are not too particular. Since she pays by piecework, her blackguards are not likely to stick at a murder or two. They want our naval dispositions for their collection at the Marinamt. They'll be pigeonholed. Nothing more.
What? I'm a little confused. I'm not certain which power he's talking about.
There's a trunk call from
Whether it's German, Germany.
And he wants to speak to you personally.
My host went off to get to the telephone. He returned in 5 minutes with a whitish face.
I apologize to the shade of Scudder. Carolides was shot dead this evening at a few minutes after 7.
Wow. opened early. The Black Stone. May 14th June 1914. Sir Walter's Cottage, Artenswell. I came to breakfast next morning. Hours of sleep, of blessed dreamlessness, I believe, as it said. I found Sir Walter decoding a telegram in the midst of muffins and marmalade. His fresh rosiness of yesterday seemed a thought tarnished.
I had a busy hour on the telephone after you went to bed. I got my chief to speak to the First Lord and the Secretary for War, and they're bringing Roy over a day sooner. Now, this wire clinches it. He'll be in London at 5. Odd that the code word for a sous chef d'etat major general should be porker.
He directed me to the hot dishes and went on.
Not that I think it'll do much good. If your friends were clever enough to find out the first arrangement, they're clever enough to discover the change. I would give my head to know where the leak is. We believed there were only 5 men in England who knew about Royer's visit, and you may be certain there were fewer in France, for they manage these things better there.
And who is Royer? Have I just completely forgotten something important? Royer dines with my chief, and then comes to my house, where 4 people will see him. Whitaker from the Admiralty, myself, Sir Arthur Thro, and General Winstanley. Winstanley? Winstanley? At my house he will get a certain document from Whitaker, and after that he will be motored to Portsmouth, where a destroyer will take him to Havre. He will never be left unattended for a moment till he is safe on French soil. The same with Whitaker till he meets Royer. Royer.
That is the best we can do, and it's hard to see how there can be any miscarriage. But I don't mind admitting that I'm horribly nervous. This murder of Karolides will play the deuce in the chancelleries of Europe. Annie?
That was random.
Can you drive a car?
Why, yes.
Well, you'll be my chauffeur today and wear Hudson's rig. You're about his size. You have a hand in this business and we're taking no risks. There are desperate men against us who will not respect the country retreat of an overworked official.
We're not out of danger yet. It was a soft, breathless June morning, with a promise of sultriness later, but it was delicious enough swinging through the little towns, with their freshly watered streets, and past the summer gardens of the Thames Valley. Lots happened since we last saw London. I landed Sir Walter at his house in Queen Anne's Gate punctually by 11:30. The first thing he did was take me round to Scotland Yard. There we saw a prim gentleman with a clear-shaven lawyer's face. Clean-shaven, excuse me.
McGillivray, I've brought you the Portland Place murderer.
The reply was a wry smile.
It would have been a welcome present, Bullivant.
Right, he was the
This, I presume, is Mr.
inspector?
Hannay, who for some days greatly interested my department.
Mr. Hannay will interest it again. He has much to tell you, but not today. For certain grave reasons, his tale must wait for 4 hours. Then, I can promise you, you will be entertained and possibly edified. I want you to assure Mr. Hannay that he will suffer no further inconvenience.
The assurance was promptly given.
You can take up your life where you left off. Your flat, which probably you no longer wish to occupy, is waiting for you. And your man is still there. As you were never publicly accused, we considered that there was no need of a public exculpation. But on that, of course, you must please yourself.
McGillivray, we may want your assistance later on. Come and see me tomorrow, Hannay. I needn't tell you to keep deadly quiet. If I were you, I would go to bed, for you must have considerable arrears of sleep to overtake. You'd better lie low, for if one of your Black Stone friends saw you, there might be trouble.
Of course.
Arrears of sleep. I like that. I think I have quite a few arrears of sleep myself. It was very pleasant to be a free man, able to go where I wanted. I went to the Savoy Lounge, ordered very carefully a very good luncheon, and then smoked the best cigar the house could provide. But I was still feeling nervous. When I saw anybody look at me in the lounge, I grew shy and wondered if they were thinking about the murder. I took a taxi and drove miles away up into North London. I walked back through fields and lines of villas and terraces, and then slums and mean streets, and it took me pretty nearly 2 hours. I dined at a restaurant in Jermyn Street. I was no longer hungry, and let several courses pass untasted. I drank the best part of a bottle of Burgundy, but it did nothing to cheer me. An abominable restlessness had taken possession of me. I didn't feel like going back to my flat. I'd had to be faced sometime, but as I still had sufficient money, I thought I would put it off till next morning and go to a hotel for the night. I had only been a month under the ban of the law, and it was quite enough for me. Yet I felt curiously at a loose end. I felt that great things, tremendous things, were happening or about to happen, and I, who was the cogwheel of the whole business, was out of it. The same listlessness we felt before this all started. Or a variation of it. Here was I, a very ordinary fellow with no particular brains, yet I was convinced that somehow I was needed to help this business through, that without me it would all go to blazes. I told myself it was sheer silly conceit, that 4 or 5 of the cleverest people living, with all the might of the British Empire at their back, had the job in hand. Yet I couldn't be convinced. It seemed as if a voice kept speaking in my ear, telling me to be up and doing, or I would never sleep again. The upshot was that about 9:30 I made up my mind to go to Queen Anne's Gate. Very likely I would not be admitted, but it would ease my conscience to try. On my way, I passed a group of young men. They were in evening dress, had been dining somewhere, and were going on to a music hall. One of them was Marmaduke Jopley.
By God, the murderer! Here, you fellows hold him! That's Hannay, the man who did the Portland Place murder!
Do shut up, Marmee. I wasn't looking for trouble, but my ill temper made me play the fool, and the sight of Marmee's imbecile face was more than I could bear. Oh, gore!
What's going on here?
Oh, this man is the Portland Place murderer!
Damn it all! Make the fellow shut up! I advise you to leave me alone, Constable. Scotland Yard knows all about me, and you'll get a proper wigging if you interfere.
You've got to come along with me, young man. I saw you strike that gentleman cruel hard. You began it too, for he wasn't doing nothing. I've seen you. You best go quietly, or I'll have to fix you up. Watch him! Watch him! Right, come back here!
And I'm on the run once again. I have a very fair turn of speed, and that night I had wings. In a jiffy, I was in Pall Mall, and had turned down towards St. James Park, and was smoking unfiltered cigarettes. Oh, different Pall Mall. Happily, there were few people about, and no one tried to stop me. I was staking all on getting to Queen Anne's Gate.
I must see Sir Walter. My business is desperately important.
The butler was a great man. Without moving a muscle, he held the door open and then shut it behind him.
Sir Walter is engaged, sir, and I have orders to admit no one. Perhaps you will wait.
See here. There's trouble about, and I'm in it. But Sir Walter knows, and I'm working for him. If anyone comes and asks if I'm here, tell him a lie.
The butler doesn't know. I mean, I guess he just saw me as the chauffeur. I was seated and told to wait. He returned to the door, and with a face like a graven image, waited to be questioned.
This is the house of Sir Walter Bullivant, and I am under the strictest orders not to let anyone, no matter who, interrupt his office.
Certainly stopped them. What am I supposed to click on? The paper. Greek premier assassinated. Horror descended on Whitehall last night after Greek Prime Minister Konstantin Karolides was shot dead in London. The murder took place around 7 o'clock p.m. in a private apartment in Horse Guards, where the Greek premier was staying at the invitation of the Foreign Office. Although the area around St. James's Park was busy at the time, Scotland Yard has released no details of the suspect, and the assassin remains at large. Karolides was alone at the time of the shooting, and no direct witnesses to the act have been established. Police and security agents have yet to confirm whether the shooter was located in the room or fired from an adjacent building. Questions are already being raised about the security arrangements for the visit. Sir Humphrey Bullingstone, the RH member from Harrow, declared that it is a disgrace to the fine name of Her Majesty's government that a serving head of state can be murdered in cold blood in such close proximity to the King's residence. Armed security at Buckingham Palace and Downing Street has been increased as a precaution. Karolides' visit was thought to concern his recent call for a major international conference to settle the ongoing territorial claims that continue to beset the Balkans. The visit may also have included discussion about potential British assistance to secure Greek claims over various Ottoman islands in the Aegean, although War Minister Thro has repeatedly insisted that Her Majesty's government does not intend to send the Mediterranean fleet to intervene. Motivations for the assassination were unclear, and Carolides is known to have had numerous enemies. Ottoman influences are a likely candidate, although relations between Carolides and the Porte were relatively cordial compared with his predecessors. Berlin's efforts to form an alliance with Bulgaria and its long-standing relationship with the Ottomans have led to a tense relationship between Berlin and Athens. German Foreign Minister Schulte recently described Carolides as a millstone around the necks of the Greeks. The German theory has supporters within Parliament. Sir Humphrey has already suggested that we will most likely find the hand of the Kaiser somewhere near the trigger of the gun. Sir Walter Bullivant, permanent secretary at the Foreign Office, reacted with shock and fury to the events of last night, and told this newspaper that this is an appalling act of political murder within the very heart of our government, and we will leave no stone unturned to catch those responsible. Oops. I don't know if I accidentally clicked out or I clicked correctly. Sir Walter also extolled the influence of Carolides as a steady rock in the volatile world of Balkan politics. The tireless work of Constantine Carolides in search of peaceful solutions to the Eastern question have been without compare in recent years, explained Sir Walter. We must ensure to continue the spirit of his work. Privately, however, the Foreign Office is thought to be deeply concerned that, in the absence of Carolides, the situation in the region will deteriorate yet further. The fate of the international conference that Carolides had called for is also unknown, although in the essence of a respected, strong man, it appears unlikely that such an affair will go ahead in the immediate future. Unfortunate. Seems to be the only thing here. I hadn't waited long till there came another ring at the bell. The butler made no bones about admitting this new visitor. I recognized the First Sea Lord, the man, they say, that made the new British Navy. He passed my alcove and was ushered into a room at the back of the hall. As the door opened, I could hear the sounds of low voices. It shut, and I was left alone again. For 20 minutes I sat there, wondering what I was to do next. Then the door of the back room opened and the First Sea Lord came out. He walked past me, and in passing, he glanced in my direction, and for a second we looked each other in the face. I had never seen the great man before, and he had never seen me. But in that fraction of time, something sprang into his eyes, and that something was recognition. You can't mistake it. It is a flicker, a spark of light, a minute shade of difference which means one thing and one thing only.
Residence. How I help you?
Is his lordship at home?
His lordship returned half an hour ago and has gone to bed. He's not very well tonight. Will you leave him a message, sir?
I knew it.
Oh, so that wasn't him. Not a moment could be lost, so I marched boldly to the door of the back room and entered without knocking. The 39 Steps, which was a phrase that kept appearing in Scudder's Black Book. 14th June 1914, Queen Anne's Gate, London.
And I feel reassured.
Sir Walter!
Gentlemen!
5 surprised faces looked up from a round table. There was Sir Walter and Drew the War Minister, whom I knew from his photographs. There was a slim elderly man, who was probably Whitaker, the Admiralty official, and there was General Winstanley, conspicuous from the long scar on his forehead. Lastly, there was a short stout man with an iron-grey mustache and bushy eyebrows. This must have been Royer.
This is Mr. Hannay, of whom I have spoken to you. I'm afraid, Hannay, this visit is ill-timed.
That remains to be seen, sir. But I think it may be in the nick of time. For God's sake, gentlemen, tell me who went out a minute ago.
Sir Walter's face reddened with anger.
Lord Alloa.
It was not. It was his living image, but it was not Lord Alloa. It was someone who recognized me, someone I have seen in the last month. He had scarcely left the doorstep when I rang up Lord Alloa's house and was told he had come in half an hour before and had gone to bed.
Who?
The Black Stone.
Nonsense.
I sat down in the chair so recently vacated and looked round at 5 badly scared gentlemen. Sir Walter got up and left the room while we looked blankly at the table. He came back in 10 minutes with a long face.
I have spoken to Alloa. Had him out of bed, very grumpy. He went straight home after Malross's dinner.
But it's madness. Do you mean to tell me that that man came here and sat beside me for the best part of half an hour and that I didn't detect the imposture? Alloa must be out of his mind.
I was getting back my coolness. This would have been... Yeah, this was... I don't think they developed like plastic surgery in any form until after World War I, wasn't it?
Don't you see
Wonder.
the cleverness of it? You were too interested in other things to have any eyes. You took Lord Alloa for granted. If it had been anybody else, you might have looked more closely, but it was natural for him to be here, and that put you all to sleep.
Royer bent his wise brows on the assembly.
Young man is right. His psychology is good. Our enemies have not been foolish. I will tell you a tale. It happened many years ago in Senegal.
Silent movie time? Maybe? Yay, silent movie time. These are so much fun. Royer's close shave. Many years ago, the General Royer was quartered in a remote station in Senegal. To pass the time, he fished for a big barbel in the river. I'll be back soon, girl. Is that a lion? One morning, his horse was unaccountably restless. Perhaps because there was a lion 2 feet away from his horse. Royer kept soothing her with his voice, his mind intent on fishing. I'll be back soon, girl. A couple of hours passed. That lion is an impeccable eater. And he's still hungry. Royer stood face to face with an old man-eater. That horse skeleton. I was enough of a hunter to know a true yarn when I heard
I
it.
stuffed my fishing rod into his jaws, and I had a pistol. Also, my servants came presently with rifles. But he left his mark on me.
He held up a hand which lacked 3 fingers.
Consider. The mare had been dead more than an hour, and the brute had been patiently watching me ever since. I never saw the kill, for I was accustomed to the mare's fretting, and I never marked her absence, for my consciousness of her was only of something tawny, and the lion filled that part. If I could blunder thus, gentlemen, in a land where men's senses are keen, why should we busy, preoccupied urban folk not err also?
It's amazing. Sir Walter nodded. No one was ready to gainsay him. I can believe that story.
Well, I suppose there is nothing for it but to change the plans.
Whitaker was looking very glum.
Did you tell Lord Alloa what has happened? No? Well, I can't speak with absolute assurance, but I'm nearly certain we can't make any serious change, unless we alter the geography of England.
He paused and looked around.
God, and we have not a rag of a clue.
Besides, there is the post. By this time the news will be on its way.
No. You do not understand the habits of the spy. He receives personally his reward, and he delivers personally his intelligence. We in France know something of the breed. Now, there is still a chance, mes amis. These men must cross the sea, and there are ships to be searched and ports to be watched. Believe me, the need is desperate for both France and Britain.
I had a sudden inspiration.
Where is Scudder's book? Quick, man. I remember something in it.
What is it?
On there.
Balkan chaos. 39 steps. I counted them. High tide, 10:17 p.m.
"39 steps. 39 steps. I counted them. High tide, 10:17 p.m. What relevance is
The Admiralty man was looking at me as if he thought I had gone mad.
Don't you see? It's a clue. Scudder knew where these fellows laired. He knew where they were going to leave the country, though he kept the name to himself. Tomorrow was the day, and it was some place where high tide was at 10:17.
But they may have gone tonight.
Not they. They have their own snug, secret way, and they won't be hurried. I know Germans, and they are mad about working to a plan. Where the devil can I get a book of tide tables?
Whitaker brightened up.
Let's go over to the Admiralty.
We got into 2 of the waiting motor cars. Sir Walter went off to Scotland Yard to mobilise McGillivray. the Admiralty. A resident clerk was unearthed, and who presently fetched from the library the Admiralty tide tables. I sat at the desk and the others stood round, for somehow or other I had got charge of this expedition. But it was no good. So far as I could see, 1017 might cover 50 places. We had to find some way of narrowing the possibilities. There must be some way of reading this riddle. The riddle. What did Scudder mean by steps? If it were dock steps, why mention the number? It must be someplace with several staircases, and one marked out from the others by having 39 steps. Why was high tide so important? It must be some little harbour or no harbour at all. There were no sets of staircases on any harbour that I'd ever seen. The place must be a bit of open coast. He's a man in a hurry. He wants a speedy and secret passage. They wouldn't travel by a big boat from a regular harbour. There is no regular steamer sailing at that hour. I must put myself in the enemy's shoes. I wouldn't leave from the Channel or the west coast. Scotland is too far. I should try for Ostend or Antwerp or Rotterdam. I should sail from somewhere on the east coast between Cromer and Dover. This is all guesswork. I am no kind of Sherlock Holmes, but I do have a feeling about all of this. Time is running out. 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 I set out all my conclusions on a bit of Admiralty paper. Fairly certain. Place where there are several sets of stairs. One that matters distinguished by having 39 steps. Full tide at 10:17 p.m. Leaving shore only possible at full tide. Steps not dock steps, and someplace probably not harbour. No regular night steamer at 10:17. Means of transport must be tramp, unlikely, yacht, or fishing boat. Guessed. Place not harbour but open coast. Boat small, trawler, yacht, or launch. Place somewhere on east coast between Cromer and Dover. Sir Walter had joined us, and presently MacGillivray arrived. He had sent out instructions to watch the ports and railway stations for the 3 men whom I had described to Sir Walter. Not that he or anybody else thought that would do much good.
Here's the most I can make of it. We have got to find a place where there are several staircases down to the beach, one of which has 39 steps. I think it's a piece of open coast with biggish cliffs somewhere between the Wash and the Channel. Also, it's a place where full tide is at 10:17 tomorrow night.
Then an idea struck me.
Is there no inspector of Coast Guards or some fellow like that knows the East Coast?
Why, yes there is. He lives in Clapham. Let me get him now.
He went off in a car to fetch him. I lit a pipe and went over the whole thing again till my brain grew weary. About 1 in the morning, the Coast Guard man arrived. He was a fine old fellow, with the look of a naval officer, and was desperately respectful to the company.
This is the chap.
Good evening, gentlemen.
We want you to tell us the places you know on the east coast where there are cliffs and where several sets of steps run down to the beach.
What kind of steps do you mean, sir? There are plenty of places with roads cut down through the cliffs, and most roads have a step or two in them. Or do you mean regular staircases, all steps, so to speak?
Whitaker looked towards me.
You mean regular staircases?
He reflected a moment or two.
I don't know that I can think of any. Wait a second. There's a place in Norfolk, Brattlesham, beside a golf course, where there are a couple of staircases to let the gentleman get a lost ball.
That's not it.
Then there are plenty of marine parades, if that's what you mean. Every seaside resort has them.
I shook my head.
It's got to be more retired than that.
Well, gentlemen, I can't think of anywhere else. Of course, there's the Rough.
What's that?
Hey, Haggard
The big
Hessian.
headland in Kent, close to Bradgate. It's got a
Thanks
lot
for
of
coming
villas
by.
on
How are you
top.
doing today?
Some of the houses have staircases down to a private beach. It's a very high-toned sort of place, and the residents there like to keep by themselves.
There's no easy way to pause.
We're on the scent at last.
The 39 steps.
How can I find out what is the tide at the Rough?
I can tell you that, sir. I once was let a house there in this very month.
Oh,
and I used to go out
just
at night
finished
to the deep sea fishing.
the campaign in Resident Evil 6. Nice. I closed the book and looked around the company. And, just a moment. Everybody, please go check out Haggard Hessian, who has been streaming pretty much the entire Resident Evil series, unless I'm mistaken. Or damn near it, before the new one comes out. Does that leave only... You have only one more Resident Evil game to go, Hessian? Before you finish them all? Or is there another campaign you're going to do in Resident Evil 6? Code Veronica, right. That's the PS2 exclusive. Right, because I guess for a while after Resident Evil 2 they weren't porting so many. There were some that were console exclusive. There are three more campaigns, but you don't have interest in them. Oh, and Code Veronica was also on Dreamcast. Gotcha. Yeah. I can't keep track of how many Resident Evil games there are. I think there was also one for PlayStation 1 that was more like a shooter. A first person. That one always sounded interesting. But so if you're done with that one, I guess you're going to move on to Resident Evil 7. Let's see. I watch you play some of them, and they look like they can get pretty hard, some of those boss fights. Oh, there were a few wee ones that tied them all together, in a way. Interesting. It's such a long series, which I would like to play through. Actually, I have Resident Evil 1 for both PlayStation and GameCube, but I kind of want to stream it, and I need a capture card for that. Who was it? I think it was that girl Joey who was recently streaming the original PlayStation Resident Evil 1 on original hardware. Seems like it would be a fun way to do it. And that's great to hear. We're just playing 39 steps and fairly close to the end at this point. I think we've only got a couple chapters left. We're in a rush to try and stop the spies before they leave Britain with important details about the Navy, and we're narrowing it down to where they're planning to leave the country, the 39 steps being a key clue. I closed the book and looked around the company.
If one of those staircases has 39 steps, we have solved the mystery, gentlemen. I want the loan of your car, Sir Walter, and a map of the roads.
Of course.
If Mr. McGillivray will spare me 10 minutes, yes, I think we can prepare something for tomorrow.
Good. I, for one, am content to leave the matter in Mr. Hannay's hands.
It was ridiculous of me to take charge of the business like this, but they didn't seem to mind, and after all, I had been in the show from the start. Besides, I was used to rough jobs, and these eminent gentlemen were too clever not to see it. Yes, we are a bit out of our depth here. By 3:30 in the morning, I was tearing past the moonlit hedgerows of Kent, with McGillivray's best man, Scaife, on the seat beside me. Masters of disguise. Considering we just spent half the game in disguise ourselves. Monday, 15th June, 1914. Bradgate, Kent. Oh, we're gonna get some sleep. Have a good night, Ashen. Thank you so much for stopping by. I look forward to seeing your next stream. A pink and blue June morning found me at Bradgate, looking from the Griffin Hotel over a smooth sea. Griffin Hotel, excuse me. The light ship on the Cock Sands seemed the size of a bellboy. A couple of miles further south, and much nearer the shore, a small destroyer was anchored. The light ship on the Cock Sands. Oh, that's just what I just said. Scaife had been in the Navy and knew the boat. He told me her name and her commanders, so I sent off a wire to Sir Walter. A small destroyer. Oh, I see. We're looking out the window there, right. After breakfast, Scaife got from a house agent a key to the gates of the staircases on the Rough. Oops. Now go back. I walked with him along the sands and sat down in a nook on the cliffs while he investigated the half-dozen of them. I didn't want to be seen, but the place at this hour was quite deserted, and all the time I was on the beach I saw nothing but the seagulls. It took him more than an hour to do the job. Everything depended on my guess proving right. He read aloud the number of the steps in the different stairs.
34, 35, 42, 47, and 21, where the cliffs get lower. Oh, and 39.
Oh!
We have them!
We lurched back to the town and sent a wire to Mr. McGillivray. I wanted half a dozen men, and I directed them to divide themselves among different specified hotels. Then Scaife set out to prospect the house at the head of the 39 steps. He came back with news that both puzzled and reassured me. The house was called Trafalgar Lodge and belonged to an old gentleman called Appleton, a retired stockbroker, the house agent said. Only 3 servants were kept, a cook, a parlour-maid, and a housemaid. The cook was not the gossiping kind, and had pretty soon shut the door in his face, but Scaife said he was positive she knew nothing. They were just the sort that you would find in a respectable middle-class household. Mr. Appleton was there a good deal in the summer-time, and was in residence now, had been for the better part of a week. Scaife could pick up very little information about him, except that he was a decent old fellow, who paid his bills regularly, and was always good for a fiver for a local charity. Next door there was a new house building, which would give good cover for observation, and the villa on the other side was to let, and its garden was rough and shrubby. I borrowed Scaife's telescope, and before lunch went for a walk along the rough. I kept well behind the rows of villas, and found a good observation point on the edge of the golf course. There's the house. I observed someone leave the house and saunter along the cliff. I saw it was an old man wearing white flannel trousers, a blue serge jacket, and a straw hat. He carried field glasses and a newspaper. He sat down on one of the iron seats and began to read. Sometimes he would lay down the paper and turn his glasses on the sea. He looked for a long time at the destroyer. I watched the elderly man for half an hour, till he got up and went back to the house for his luncheon, when I returned to the hotel for mine. This decent commonplace dwelling was not what I had expected. The man might be the bald archaeologist of that horrible Moorfield farm, or he might not. He was exactly the kind of satisfied old bird you find in every suburb and every holiday place. If you want a type of the perfectly harmless person, you would probably pitch on that. After lunch I perked up, for I saw the thing I had hoped for and I had dreaded to miss. Her name was the Ariadne. Scaife had said she was a fast boat for her build, and that she was pretty heavily engineered. Scaife and I went down to the harbour and hired a boatman for an afternoon's fishing. About 4 o'clock, I made the boatman row us around the yacht, which lay like a delicate white bird, ready at a moment to flee. One of the men was polishing the brasswork. I spoke to him and got an answer in the soft dialect of Essex. Another hand that came along passed me the time of day in an unmistakable English tongue. And none of them have German accents. Our boatman had an argument with one of them about the weather, and for a few minutes we lay on our oars close to the starboard bow. Then the men suddenly disregarded us and bent their heads to their work as an officer came along the deck. He was a pleasant, clean-looking young fellow, and he put a question to us about our fishing in very good English. But there could be no doubt about him. His close-cropped head and the cut of his collar and tie never came out of England. I know Germans. In the hotel, I met the commander of the destroyer, to whom Scaife introduced me, and with whom I had a few words. I then thought I would put in an hour or two watching Trafalgar Lodge. They played with tremendous zest, like two city gents who wanted hard exercise to open their pores. They shouted and laughed and stopped for drinks when a maid brought out 2 tankards on a salver. You couldn't conceive a more innocent spectacle. I rubbed my eyes and asked myself if I was not the most immortal fool on earth. Mystery and darkness had hung about the men who hunted me over the Scotch moor in aeroplane and motor car, and notably about that infernal antiquarian. It was easy enough to connect those folk with the knife that pinned Scudder to the floor, and with fell designs on the world's peace. But here were 2 guileless citizens taking their innocuous exercise, and soon about to go indoors for a humdrum dinner, where they would talk of market prices and the last cricket scores. The thing that worried me was the reflection that my enemies knew that I had got my knowledge from Scudder, and it was Scudder who had given me the clue to this place. If they knew that Scudder had this clue, would they not be certain to change their plans? I had talked confidently last night about Germans always sticking to a scheme, but if they had any suspicions that I was on their track, they would be fools not to cover it. It makes a good point. I had been making a net to catch vultures and falcons, and, lo and behold, 2 plump thrushes had blundered into it. Presently a third figure, a arrived, a young man on a bicycle. He was welcomed riotously by the players.
You all right there, Percy?
Yes, you're looking a little hot under the collar.
I got into a proper lather. This'll bring down my weight and my handicap, Bob. I'll take you on tomorrow and give you a stroke a hole.
Having a merry time. They all went into the house and left me feeling a precious idiot. I would rather have walked into a den of anarchists, each with his Browning handy, or faced a charging lion with a pop gun, than enter that happy home of 3 cheerful Englishmen and tell them that their game was up. But then I remembered old Peter Pienaar. He was the best scout I ever knew, and before he had turned respectable, he had been pretty often on the windy side of the law. Peter once discussed with me the question of disguises, and had a theory which struck me at the time. He said, barring absolute certainties like fingerprints, mere physical traits were very little use for identification if the fugitive really knew his business. The only thing that mattered was what Peter called atmosphere. Those chaps didn't need to act, they just turned a handle and passed into another life, which came as naturally to them as the first. Peter used to say that it was the big secret of all the famous criminals. This recollection gave me the first real comfort I had that day. Peter had been a wise old bird, and these fellows I was after were about the pick of the aviary. It was now getting on for 8 o'clock, and I went back and saw Scaife to give him instructions. I arranged with him how to place his men, and then I went for a walk, for I didn't feel up to my dinner. To any dinner. It took all my resolution to stroll towards Trafalgar Lodge. On the way, I got a piece of solid comfort from the sight of a greyhound that was swinging along at a nursemaid's heels. He reminded me of a dog I used to have in Rhodesia. High tides. Could Hene have got it all wrong? The final stand will reveal all. Next time on twitch.tv/purblindgamer. No, just kidding, we're going to finish it. Not to worry. My little joke, all harmless wise. High tides. Monday, 15th June 1914. Bradgate, Kent. I arrived once again at Trafalgar Lodge. Scaife's men would be posted by now, but there was no sign of a soul. Oh, that was the doorbell. It was a doorknob at first.
Mr. Appleton at home?
Yes, sir. Please come in.
My plan had been to walk straight into the dining room, and by a sudden appearance wake in the men the start of recognition which would confirm my theory. But when I found myself in that great hall, the place mastered me.
Who may I say is calling?
Richard Hannay.
If you could wait in the smoking room, I'll let Mr. Appleton know you're here.
Realizing my mistake, I pulled myself together and ran after the maid. But I was too late.
Mr. Hannay, do you wish to see me?
I think we have met before, and I guess you know my business.
The light in the room was dim, but so far as I could see their faces, they played the part of mystification very well.
Maybe I haven't a very good memory, but I'm afraid you must tell me your errand, sir, for I really don't know it.
Well then, I have come to tell you that the game's up.
All the time I seemed to myself to be talking pure foolishness. In a way, it's the reversal of when we were playing Ned Ainsley.
I have a warrant, the arrest of you three gentlemen.
Arrest? Arrest? Good God, what for?
He looked really shocked.
Franklin Scudder in London on the 23rd day of last month.
I never heard the name before.
That was the Portland Place murder. I read about it. Good heavens. You must be mad, sir. Where do you come from?
Scotland Yard.
Though I hadn't an ounce of confidence in me, I forced myself to play the game.
Don't get flustered, Uncle. It's all a ridiculous mistake, but these things happen sometimes, and we can easily set it right. It won't be hard to prove our innocence. I can show you that I was out the country on the 23rd of May, and Bob was in a nursing home. You were in London, but you can explain what you were doing.
Right, Percy. Of course, that's easy enough. The 23rd. That was the day after Agatha's wedding. Let me see, what was I doing? Came up in the morning from Woking and lunched at the club with Charlie Simons. Then, oh yes, I dined with the fishmongers. I remember, for the punch didn't agree with me, and I was seedy next morning. But hang it all, there's the cigar box I brought back from the dinner.
Ah, conclusive proof, it would seem. After that, for a minute, there was utter silence. The old man was staring at his plate and fumbling with a nut, the very model of innocent bewilderment.
I think, sir, you will see you are mistaken. We want to assist the law like all Englishmen, and we don't want Scotland Yard to be making fools of themselves. That's so, Uncle?
Certainly, Bob.
The old fellow seemed to be recovering his voice.
Certainly, we'll do anything in our power to assist the authorities, but this is a bit too much. I can't get over it.
How Nellie will chuckle. She always said you would die of boredom because nothing ever happened to you. Now, you've got it thick and strong.
It couldn't be acting. It was too confoundedly genuine.
Oh yes, just think of it. What a story to tell at the club. Really, Mr. Hannay, I suppose I should be angry to show my innocence, but it's too funny. I almost forgive you the fright you gave me. You looked so glum. I thought I might have been walking in my sleep and killing people.
Yeah. To cover my confusion, I got up, walked to the door, and switched on the electric light. The sudden glare made them blink, and I stood scanning the three faces. I made nothing of it. One was old and bald, one was stout, one was dark and thin. They seemed exactly what they professed to be, and I could not have sworn to one of them. I could see nothing to connect them with the moorland desperados.
Well, are you reassured by your scrutiny, sir?
I couldn't find a word.
I hope you find it consistent with your duty to drop this ridiculous business. I make no complaint, but you see how annoying it must be to respectable people.
I shook my head.
Oh, Lord. This is a bit too thick.
Do you propose to march us off to the police station? That might be the best way out of it, but I suppose you won't be content with the local branch. I have the right to ask to see your warrant, but I don't wish to cast any aspersions upon you. You're only doing your duty. You'll admit, it's horribly awkward. What do you propose to do?
For a moment, I was very near damning myself for a fool and asking their pardon.
Time I vote we have a game of bridge. It'll give Mr. Hanny time to think over things. You know we've been wanting a fourth player. Will you play, sir?
I accepted as if it had been an ordinary invitation at the club.
Yes, I play.
I felt mesmerized by the whole place, by the air of obvious innocence. Not innocence merely, but frank, honest bewilderment and concern in the three faces. We went into the smoking room where a card table was set out, and I was offered things to smoke and drink. The three were talking easily, just the kind of slangy talk you will hear in any golf clubhouse. I myself, I must have cut a rum figure, sitting there knitting my brows with my eyes wandering. My partner was the young dark one. Oh, shoot. Did I? I accidentally right-clicked. Damnation. I'm sorry. I don't believe there's any way to skip easily through it. I don't know why I sometimes absently right-click. I will say that's the one thing that is frustrating game design. And specifically since you can't, skip ahead, fast forward or whatever.
Is, Mr. Appleton at home?
Yes, sir. Please come in.
Unfortunately, the chapters are fairly short. I mean, I get why they don't let you skip through the spoken dialogue if, they're trying to maintain the pacing and everything.
Richard Hanning.
If you
Still.
could wait in the smoking room, I'll let Mr. Appleton know you're here.
Mr. Hanny, you wish to see me?
I think we have met before, and I guess you know my business.
Maybe. I haven't a very good memory, but I'm afraid you must tell me your errand, sir, for I really don't know it.
Well then, I have come to tell you that the game's up. I have a warrant, the arrest of you three gentlemen.
Arrest? Arrest? Good God, what for?
For the murder of Franklin Scudder in London on the 23rd day of last month.
I never heard the name before.
And that was the Portland Place murder. I read about it. Good heavens. You must be mad, sir. Where do you come from?
Scotland Yard.
Don't get flustered, Uncle. It's all a ridiculous mistake. But these things happen sometimes, and we can easily set it right. It won't be hard to prove our innocence. I can show you that I was out the country on the 23rd of May, and Bob was in a nursing home. You were in London, but you can explain what you were doing.
Right, Percy. Of course, that's easy enough. The 23rd. That was the day after Agatha's wedding. Let me see, what was I doing? Came up in the morning from Woking and lunched at the club with Charlie Simons. Then, oh yes, I dined with the fishmongers. I remember, for the punch didn't agree with me and I was seedy next morning. Hang it all, there's the cigar box I brought back from the dinner.
Interesting, they were giving out souvenir cigar boxes.
I think, sir, you will see you are mistaken. We want to assist the law like all Englishmen. We don't want Scotland Yard to be making fools of themselves. That's so, Uncle?
Certainly, Bob.
I must make it a point to give out souvenir cigar boxes at some point in my life.
Certainly. We'll do anything in our power to assist the authorities, but this is a bit too much. I can't get over it.
How Nellie will chuckle. She always said you would die of boredom because nothing ever happened to you. Now, you've got it thick and strong.
By Joe, yes, just think of it. What a story to tell at the club. Really, Mr. Halley. I suppose I should be angry to show my innocence, but it's too funny. I almost forgive you the fright you gave me. You looked so glum. I thought I might have been walking in my sleep and killing people.
Turn on the light.
Well, are you reassured by your scrutiny, sir? I hope you'll find it consistent with your duty to drop this ridiculous business. I make no complaint, but you see how annoying it must be to respectable people.
Oh, Lord. This is a bit too thick.
Do you propose to march us off to the police station? That might be the best way out of it, but I suppose you won't be content with the local branch. I have the right to ask to see your warrant. But I don't wish to cast any aspersions upon you. You're only doing your duty. You'll admit, it's horribly awkward. What do you propose to do? Meantime, I vote we have a game of bridge. It'll give Mr. Hanny time to think over things. You know we've been wanting a fourth player.
So terribly confident.
Yes, I play.
I felt mesmerized by the whole place, by the air of obvious innocence. Not innocence merely, but frank, honest bewilderment and concern in the three faces. I reflected that I'd been here such a long time, and I damned that streamer for a fool, for right-clicking and resetting the whole chapter, after everything I'd been through. This was almost too much. But I let him left-click and proceed. We went into the smoking room where there was a card table was set out, and I was offered things to smoke and drink. The three were talking easily, just the kind of slangy talk you will hear at any golf clubhouse. I must have cut a rum figure, sitting there knitting my brows with my eyes wandering. My partner was the young dark one. I played a fair hand at bridge, but I must have been rank. I play a fair hand at bridge, but I must have been rank bad that night. They saw that they had got me puzzled, and that put them more than ever at their ease. I kept looking at their faces, but they conveyed nothing to me. It was not that they looked different, they were different. I clung desperately to the words of Peter Pienaar. Then it happened. Just like in the house, some shadow lifted from my brain, and I was looking at the three men with full and absolute recognition. The Black Stone. The dark, lean man, he was the murderer. Now I saw cruelty and ruthlessness, where before I had only seen good humour. His knife had skewered Scudder to the floor, and his kind had put the bullet in Carolides. The plump man's features seemed to dislimn and form again, and as I looked at them, he hadn't a face, only 100 masks that he could assume when he pleased. That chap must have been a superb actor. Perhaps he had been Lord Alloa on the night before. Perhaps not. It didn't matter. I wondered if he was the fellow that had first tracked Scudder and left his card on him. Scudder had said he lisped, and I could imagine how the adoption of a lisp might add terror. He was the pick of the lot. He was sheer brain, icy, cool, calculating, as ruthless as a steam hammer. Now that my eyes were opened, I wondered where I had seen the benevolence. His jaw was like chilled steel, and his eyes had the inhuman luminosity of a bird's. I went on playing, and every second a greater hate welled up in my heart.
Bob, look at the time. You'd better think about catching your train. Bob's got to go to town tonight.
The voice rang now as false as hell. I looked at the clock, and it was nearly 10:30.
I'm afraid he must put off his journey.
Oh, damn. I thought you'd drop that rot. I simply got to go. You can have my address, and I'll give you any security you like.
No, you must stay.
I'll go bail for my nephew. That ought to content you, Mr. Hannay.
As I glanced at him, his eyelids fell in that hawk-like hood which fear had stamped in my memory. The eyes were superimposed for a moment. A pair of strong arms gripped me around the waist, covering the pockets in which a man might be expected to carry a pistol.
Get your hands off me! Das Boot! Das Boot!
The boat, I think. I grappled the old chap, and the room seemed to fill with figures. I saw the plump one collapse, but my eyes were all for the out-of-doors, where Franz sped on over the road towards the railed entrance to the beach stairs. One man followed him, but he had no chance. I stood staring, with my hands on the old boy's throat, for such a time as a man might take to descend those steps to the sea. Suddenly, my prisoner broke from me and flung himself on the wall. The stairway had been completely destroyed.
He is safe. You cannot follow in time. He's gone. He has triumphed. Der schwarze Stein ist in der Siegeskrone.
There was more in those eyes than any common triumph. They had been hooded like a bird of prey, and now they flamed with a hawk's pride. This man was more than a spy. In his foul way, he had been a patriot. As the handcuffs clinked on his wrists, I said my last word to him.
I hope Franz will bear his triumph well. I ought to tell you that the Ariadne for the last hour has been in our hands.
The end. I had forgotten in the book about them blowing up the steps. I wonder what else these actors have been in.
39 steps.
Interesting closing tune. It's a fairly small team. Wow, they had a lot of researchers.
39 steps.
I don't always watch the credits, but I don't think they'll be especially long. And who knows, there might be something afterwards. All those QR and testing, and they still missed a couple of typos. Oh well, these things happen. Some big companies involved in making this.
39 steps. I counted them.
I wonder if these are like early sketches or concept art. Like storyboards, maybe? Yeah, I bet they're storyboards.
I had staked everything on my belief in his stories. It had been let down.
Hey, Artyom Havoc. Thank you so much.
The little man had told me a pack of But on the 15th day of June, there were to be others.
John Buchan, 1875 to 1940.
39 steps.
Wow. Oh. Ooh. Yeah, epilogue. This is why you watch the credits to the end, guys.
3 weeks later, as all the world knows, we went to war. I joined the new army the first week, and owing to my Matabele experience, got a captain's commission straight off. But I had done my best service, I think, before I put on khaki.
Oh, hell, thank you for sticking around and watching Havoc. And doing... yeah, while you're doing your work. Congratulations, you've completed the 39 steps. We hope you enjoyed playing this story as much as we did making it. Hopefully see you for our next digital adaptation. Get on that, the story mechanics. I can't buy it if you don't make it. Yes. More adventures in store for Hane. There were, I think, 3 more books about him. Oh, there you have it, the 39 steps. Which can be purchased on Steam if you don't want to order a CD-ROM from Europe. It's interesting thinking about those, the technique they used of almost always showing people only in silhouette. Like at first I thought it was just so it, you know, you use your imagination to fill them in and potentially make them more vivid. But it also, it really works well with the whole idea of how we don't necessarily see people, like their specific physical attributes so clearly, or recognize them. Like we see the more general impression, the atmosphere. And yeah, so it worked well in the end, better than, I think probably better than it would have if they'd been showing people's faces all along. And then when they actually show the portraits of the 3 men, it's like, oh, it's really, I mean, it's a complete change. Anyway, I would be curious, because yeah, the Hitchcock movie was so different, but I'd be curious to see how they handled that in the 70s movie, which apparently followed the book a lot more closely. So, hey, England, can you go ahead and release that here now? Because we've been waiting for a while, and I want to see it. I mean, I'm sure I could get a Region 2 DVD or something, but that's an awful lot of trouble. It's kind of a shame they didn't do more stories like this. I thought it was a good piece of art, a good story, definitely. And sometimes I did just think while I was playing it, maybe I should just reread the book, but that's a bigger time commitment. I mean, the game's only 6 hours long. I wonder if it just didn't do well, like, didn't sell well enough, and you know, maybe did better amongst the literary crowd and less well against the broader gaming demographic. I don't know. It had some really good moments. I don't think I've read many other, thrillers from that time period, like the 19 teens. That's, yeah, we've completed the 39 steps, and let's see, coming up, what I'm going to be doing is on Wednesday, since I believe that Soldier of Fortune is working again, I don't know, maybe I'll finish that and then play a bit more of Alien Odyssey, as well as maybe I'll do the unboxing of it this next stream. And I do want to continue that. And, oh yeah, Havoc, so I'll probably, if I don't finish Soldier of Fortune this Wednesday, I will some future Wednesday, but I'll definitely be continuing Alien Odyssey, but getting to some of the further levels of that, and showing off the box. And then on next weekend, I'll be doing Short Horror Saturday on Friday evening instead of Saturday, so I guess it's technically Short Horror Friday. And then for next Sunday, I don't know what I'll do. If I have 10 hours to kill and, you know, a desire to drive myself insane, I might try and get Ghost Pirates of Vuju Island running again. Or I might put the CD-ROM in the washing machine and say that I've had enough of it. But I do have plenty of other games I want to play. I will decide. I'll probably let everybody know on Wednesday. I appreciate everybody who came through and watched or lurked or said hello. I'm hoping everybody enjoyed the 39 steps. Yeah, thanks, Havoc. If you guys could hang out while we raid somebody, I'd really appreciate it. Just have to look up who's online. Yeah, I was thinking of raiding Hessian, but his stream ended. Oh hey, Old School Jay's playing tonight. And he's playing Chronomaster. Yeah. I think we rated him last week, but let's rate him again. He doesn't have a whole lot of viewers right now, it seems. Chronomaster, pretty good 90s game. Oh, want to meet someone new? Do you have somebody in mind, Havoc? Yeah, I'm definitely open to suggestions. There are. Well, yeah, please tell me. I was often just trying, you know, rating somebody new. Cobra Commander. Cobra Command. I remember, was that a game for the Sega CD or was it the Nintendo? It was one of them, I'm pretty sure. Okay, Cobra Commander. Let's see what she's playing. Ah, Chrono Trigger. Oh, that'll be fun. Been hearing that's one of the greatest RPGs of all time, and thinking, as one maybe I should play on Steam, on stream, even though I hardly have any experience with turn-based RPGs. Oh, it's G.I. Joe's. Okay. I don't know what I was thinking. It was probably some game with a name somewhat similar to Cobra Command that I'm read about in a book, more likely than not. Let's see. Raid. Ah, I did indeed type it right, it looks like. Oh, thank you all again. Alright. I was thinking I could show. I showed you British sovereign earlier. I also have a British £1 note. Yeah, I need to send them to somebody. It was funny that I was like playing a game in which which showed sovereigns, and I'm like, wait a second, I have a newer incarnation of those right there. Well, thank you again to everybody for coming through my stream, which I hope you enjoyed. I'm Purblind Gamer. I stream retro, horror, and random games, and I can promise that on Wednesday there'll be a little more action, a little more interactivity, and a few more death scenes. Thank you, Havoc. I hope that everybody has a good night, and please go say hi to Cobra Commander.